let's get started. Welcome to everyone to this event tonight, Against All Odds with Messiah Rhodes and panelists. The panel tonight is Incarceration, the Pandemic, and Breaking the Cycle. I am EP, and I am on the board here at the Sanctuary for Independent Media, and I also am a producer on the Hudson Mohawk magazine. And I will be introducing tonight's event and the panelists as the night goes on. So to start, for those of you not yet familiar with the Sanctuary for Independent Media, we are a nonprofit community organization based in North Central Troy, New York. We operate a campus of activities that include, but are not limited to, community science, community gardens, and community media. If we weren't in the midst of a pandemic, we would be sitting in a former church's sanctuary, sharing space, and probably just have eaten a meal together. And we'd be talking about the importance of independent media. But we are happy to be here together tonight in a safe way to bring our community together for this panel and this discussion, and our guest, Messiah Rhodes, with his most recent film, Against All Odds. You may not know that the Sanctuary has a long history, 15 years now, of making and promoting independent media and bringing in fantastic independent media makers like Messiah Rhodes to engage and inspire and to talk about the issues in such advocacy films as Against All Odds. We currently have a community radio station, WOOC 105.3 FM, and you can also find us online at mediasanctuary.org. We are it is an all volunteer production. We have a 1-hour nightly news show called the Hudson Mohawk magazine. And if anyone here tonight is local and interested in joining such a production, you can find us at info@mediasanctuary.org, or you could drop one of the hosts a note here in the chat, and we will help you get linked in to our weekly production meetings at 7:07 on Monday nights. Tonight's event is sponsored by IER Presents, Youth Effects, Team Hero, the Coalition for Voter Education and Registration in County Jail, and the School of Humanities, Arts, and Social Science at Rensselaer. It is made possible by the New York State Council of the Arts with the support of Governor Cuomo and the New York State Legislature. As I said, tonight we will be watching Messiah Rhodes' film, Against All Odds. The structure of tonight will be hour one now. We will watch part one of the film, then take some questions for Messiah, then watch part two of the film and take more questions. And then the second hour, we will be hosting a panel called Incarceration, the Pandemic, and Breaking the Cycle with local activists who work around issues related to incarceration and focus on understanding what defunding the police means, empowerment and access to different services. We have the pleasure of welcoming panelists like Thomas Kearney from Release Aging People from Prison and Halt Solitary. We have Roni Minter with us tonight from Sisters Healing Old Wounds and also a founding member of Freedom Unshackled. And we are also joined by Nicole Cook-Reed, who is also a member of Freedom Unshackled. But before I get into all of their bios, I want to first introduce Messiah Rhodes. He was born in the far Rockaways, Queens, and did not have an easy childhood. He was separated from his parents at 4 and was homeless and on his own at 16 when he discovered his passion for writing and filmmaking. Messiah has worked for a host of different outlets, including BET, Vice Media, Democracy Now!, and produced this piece that we're about to watch for AJ+. Messiah, thank you so much for joining us at the Sanctuary for Independent Media. If you missed it, we just had a Be the Media workshop where Messiah talked about his filmmaking, and you could find a recording of that on our Facebook link. But Messiah, I want to turn it over to you to introduce part one of your film, Against All Odds.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, EP, in the media sanctuary. Like I just only could picture all of us. It's about 45 within the Zoom call. It's about a whole bunch of other people watching live. So I guess we filled up the church in Troy, New York tonight on Friday night. So it's really awesome. We can still do it and still do it safely. So this documentary I worked on for AJ Plus, AJ Contrast, is called Against All Odds, and we're gonna watch the first episode. And pretty much the first episode digs into two resources that I guess at first any human being that needs to survive, which is like, at the moment when it comes to housing and when it comes to employment and education. So these are the things that we talk about when it comes to people who just get out of jail or prison. Like, what are the resources that you need when you just get on your feet, whether it's like after you've done like a bid for like 15 years or whether you've been in and out multiple times in jail. Like, what resources you need to finally be like a contributing person in society and support your family. So for my documentary, we focus on Black women and women of color, and who actually have the highest recidivism rate amongst the population in the United States. And when you affect women, you affect almost 80% of women in jails and prisons are women. So when you incarcerate a woman, you incarcerate their children, you incarcerate their aunt, you incarcerate the great aunt that they take care of. So and that's what this first episode kind of shows. It contextualizes kind of like the intergenerational effects of incarceration, and as well as like the resources needed to break those cycles. So I guess you guys can play the first episode and we can check it out. And then thank you. I lost my mom to the criminal justice system for 15 years. And I can't help but wonder, how would my life be different if she didn't keep going back to jail?
I was crushed when they took you. It messed me up. I couldn't handle it.
She was one of the 77% of women who are rearrested within 9 years. My name is Messiah Rhodes, and as a filmmaker who grew up with a mother in and out of jail, I wanted to understand why breaking the cycle of incarceration is so difficult.
What makes us so different? We're human beings, we're people.
I'm 50 years old and I'm turning my life over.
I started filming this before the COVID-19 pandemic and the uprising over the killing of George Floyd. But the issues of systemic racism in the prison system have never been more important.
It doesn't matter what the odds are, I will bet on formerly incarcerated women any day, any time.
When I think about how my mom grew up, I think about how trauma is carried across generations. What happened to your parents?
They both died very young, my parents, in their 30s. My mom gave me to my grandmother right when I was born from the hospital. Because my grandfather went to jail for 4 years and we struggled. We hardly had food.
At 17, my mom got pregnant with me. Substance use and mental health problems would hinder her life for years.
We was in family court and they took you away from me. I was so devastated. It messed me up. I couldn't handle it, so I started using drugs even more. I was supposed to try to get you back, but I just got deeper and deeper and deeper involved in the drugs. I couldn't get out. I was medicating my pain.
Stuck in a vicious cycle, she went in and out of jail 4 times.
I had no place to go when I came out. I was homeless, so I started using right away.
This theme of fundamental lack of support is something I heard from women across the country.
I have 10 felony shoplifting convictions. At what point did a flag go up to say, hey, this lady, this woman, this girl needs some help?
If I'm a mother and you want me to be able to thrive, right, wouldn't you want services in the community? You know, wouldn't you want the government to have programs so that I don't have to commit another crime?
There is no central system, locally or federally, to support incarcerated individuals. But organizations like Hope House are trying to fill in this gap. It's a women-only reentry program in the Bronx.
And then this is our kitchen area where the women have full access to the kitchen, cooking, and you know, this is their home.
Renee Sykes, co-founder and program director, passed away from COVID-19 in May of 2020. I visited her just a few months earlier to learn more about Hope House.
We deal with it from a holistic approach. A lot of reentry, they want you to get a job as soon as you come out, right? But if you haven't dealt with those traumas that affected you at 12 and you're 50 years old and you're still battling the shame and the guilt, right? So you heal the mind and then the body will follow.
When they first brought it up, you know, I was like, I didn't need healing.
That was literally what you said.
That's what I said. There's so many things in the past that I don't really address. And when I was in that healing circle, I was like able to address some issues that, you know, I just don't want to remember anymore.
Like these women, my mom finally found a supportive housing program that kept her out of jail and helped her begin the process of healing.
It's lunchtime at the Rhodes home.
Macaroni!
Seems routine, but it's actually quite remarkable because a year ago, Monique Rhodes didn't seem like she'd ever have a home.
In 2008, a news crew in New York City did a profile on her recovery.
I lived in this abandoned shack for a while, you know, going in and out of there to get high.
Prostituting to support a drug habit, Monique gave birth to one child addicted to heroin and another she abandoned at the hospital.
Those two children were my brother and sister. I never knew them growing up.
This is the first time all three of my children were together.
Years earlier, my grandparents became my guardians after the courts decided my mother could no longer look after me.
They wouldn't let me see you.
Yeah, how did that make you feel?
I understood what she meant because she was saying we wasn't consistent in your life, so she stopped us from seeing you. You know, I just send you pictures and stuff when I was in jail. I just draw stuff and send it to the house. I don't know if you got any of that. You did?
I did, and then it stopped after a while.
So you did get that stuff?
Yeah, I got a little like Messiah bib thing. I kept that until I was too old to have that around. So. After we reconnected, my mom's life was back on the right track, but another obstacle still remained: getting a job.
Don't you remember when I was doing that online class and I asked you to help me out with the math over the phone? You remember that?
Oh, no.
29 Hawkins, yeah, I paid $200 online to get my GED. And I was calling you to help me with the calculus.
My mom's out of work and hasn't been able to look for a job for the last several years because of her disability. Nearly 44% of formerly incarcerated black women are unemployed. Projects like Operation Restoration in Louisiana are trying to help women rebuild their lives during and after prison.
When we talk about mass incarceration, we often leave out women, and the needs of women are a lot different than men and what that looks like.
Sharita Steep founded the group because of the roadblocks she faced trying to move on with her life after 10 years in prison.
For me, education changed me, it transformed me. I started taking classes while I was incarcerated, and it really put me on a path where I didn't want to return to prison.
Among the services, Operation Restoration tutors women to earn their high school equivalency diploma, or GED. Classes have been put on hold since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Us mothers gonna always be our children. Best friend,
Role
role models, everything. They gonna always look up to us.
Yes. And come to us for everything. More than the father. I'm sorry, I'm weak. I'm just playing.
Studies show that people who take part in prison education programs are less likely to be rearrested than those who haven't.
All my life I've been going in and out of jail. I didn't go to the 8th grade. I went to the 7th grade and that was it. But now I'm going to get my GED. I'm ready. I'm 50 years old and I'm turning my life over.
But even with an education, it's still far from easy.
I didn't see anybody fighting for me. For me, the black woman, I didn't see that.
Dolphinette Martin is the manager at Operation Restoration.
We're told that, your criminal conviction won't be used against you. And so when they deny you the job, if they even tell you that you're denied,
they'll use some other they won't tell you that's why, but that's why. So what we did as a movement here in this city, we banned the box on a lot of these, city jobs, state jobs, even on the federal level.
When Dolphinette talks about ban the box, she's referring to a set of laws that prohibit bosses from asking job applicants about their criminal history. 35 states across America have adopted these laws.
So if you hire one of us, you're gonna get the best employee you can get because we have something to prove. But people don't see us that way.
What struck me deeply was that for most of the women I talked to, their motivation to get back on their feet is usually their children or trying to heal from past traumas. In the next episode, I'll look at how health and family play a crucial role in how women can move forward with their lives.
Okay, that was part one of Against All Odds. Messiah, there's a part two, so don't go anywhere, but this is an opportunity, if anyone has any questions now, to chat about those, or if any thoughts come to your mind, Messiah, in sort of like the breakdown of this first section, and maybe like why we're watching this in two parts.
Oh yeah. I mean, for Nay Sykes, which was a crucial person and part of Hope House, she passed away from the coronavirus, which makes my rage for Trump even higher. But that's another story. But so here's a question: what types of programming is happening now that we have COVID? That's kind of an update question. I think that should be more of a panel question, I feel, because that's like an overall arching question about COVID-19. So for this episode, so for this episode for housing, originally it was supposed to be 4 episodes. It was supposed to be breaking down, because you have to realize that everything is that much deep important. Like from housing can be its own episode, education can be its own episode, finding his job can be its own episode, medical care can be its own episode, reconnecting with your family can be a whole, multiple season, documentary series. So it's like a lot of these stories are really complex. So it's like figuring out how to contextualize it for like the TikTok world, I guess. So at first I just want to focus on housing, and what is the first thing? Soon as it's almost like, the Titanic sinking. What's the first thing I'm thinking about? So survival. So that's what I thought about in the documentary in other ways. Okay, as soon as I get out the door with a clear plastic bag of my stuff, what do I need? And then housing, finding a job, and education. So I felt that was the first episode. And then I felt what my mom went on TV on for like almost more than 10 years ago, in 2008, 2007, she took it upon herself to tell her own story. So that was another reason why this documentary got made, because she did it on her own accord. She did it by herself. She told her story because she felt that it would motivate other people. So, and she did it for NBC a long time ago, and she did it about housing. She did it about the first thing that helped her get back on her feet after almost 15 years, and it was housing. 13 years, so it was housing. So that's how I kind of shaped the narrative and that kind of catalog of the housing. So
and there's another question here. Did you want to tell your story first?
Oh yeah, no, not at all. I mean, that's like everyone's question, is like the honesty of it. And what motivated me the most was the bravery of my mom. My mom told her story first. She told the story first. She told it long ago, before I even had the courage of even processing what she dealt with, and how it affected me. She already told her story. So that motivated me, and I kept talking. That my curiosity of why she did that over these years led me to that. So that was my motivation for telling. But then also I realized that I was in a group home. I was in a shelter. So I met many other children. I met other teenagers. I met any other young adults who were in the same similar situation. So I felt like when it comes to mass incarceration and the narrative you hear on CNN or MSNBC or these different major networks, you hear this like the 2.4 million or the 2.5 million or 2.3 million people who are incarcerated. Those are numbers are horrific, and we focus on those individuals, but we don't focus on the overarching community that's affected by those individuals being incarcerated by their children. Like when it comes to women, almost 80% of women who are incarcerated, a large percentage are mothers, and a large percentage of men are fathers who are incarcerated. So we don't acknowledge the children affected by the incarcerated. We don't acknowledge the economic situations. A lot of times people are supporting their, great aunt, or they're supporting the great grandmother who's ill. So you're affecting that generation. So when you incarcerate someone, you affect many generations. So I felt I had to not only tell my story, I had to tell like the systematic story as well. So.
And you do a really good job of like doing both of that in this piece, Against All Odds. There are some questions along that dive a little bit deeper into your personal healing journey. Was this making this piece a part of that healing journey?
Yeah, it was really healing. It felt like those like those big rock star like Queen, or like with Freddie Mercury giant concerts where someone's getting carried away in the crowd where he's singing like "We Are the Champions." That's what I felt like when I ran into like the mass like formerly incarcerated people. It felt like either I was carrying someone through the crowd, or I was being carried through the crowd. It felt like, and all of a sudden I noticed this huge community of people all over the country who support, children, and support, the overarching like family, support the people or who just came out of jail. You just see this huge community, and that was really healing for me, to hear that. And I guess that's why my mom was so like, brave to tell a story, because she knew this all along before I even had the chance to figure it out. So.
Has your mom ever done a panel like this with you after?
No, that'd be the grand kind of Jimmy Kimmel moment for her. Like she needs to, for her, when it comes to media, it needs to be Netflix. At this point, it needs to be HBO or like, Fox. So like, once I say those words, then she'd probably be on the panel. So, but she's definitely like kind of like motivated. But that's the thing about telling your personal story in documentaries. It's never over. It's never over. This is one part of my story. It's going to keep being told forever. It may be told in a fiction story with like space aliens. It may be told in another documentary that's more grounded in social justice and accuracy. So like my story, I'm always going to keep telling a story when it comes to media. And TikTok shows that in a lot of ways. People are always telling their stories. It's never over.
Messiah, I think there's a lot more to be discussed, and there are some more questions in chat, but I wonder if we could first watch part 2, and maybe you could tease what we're about to see in part 2 of Against All Odds, and then we'll come back to some questions and answers with just you before we open it up to the whole panel.
Yeah. So like, I'm a real nerd. So like I kind of made this into a encyclopedia kind of thing. So if the first episode is about housing, the first thing you need as soon as you get out of jail or prison, you need housing, you need a job, you need education, you need like skills, you need vocational training. And then the second episode deals with what is the other things you need. As soon as you get that foundation, okay, I need to reconnect with my family. If I have it, I need to I need healthcare. I need to take care of myself, because a lot of times people deal with substance abuse, mental abuse, sexual abuse, and they need like healing for those traumas, to be able to reintegrate in society and stuff like that, So that's what the second episode pretty much catalogs and tells it in a tapestry of just like my personal experience, more important, my mom's experience, and then also women who are formerly incarcerated, and also not formerly incarcerated, who are supporting communities of people who are coming out of jail or prison. So that's what the second episode of Against All Odds is about. So I guess you guys can just cue it up and play it, and we can check it out. My mother's past substance abuse had a profound impact on my childhood. Her health issues went untreated inside jail, and when she got out, she still didn't have access to proper care. She kept going back to jail over the course of 15 years.
I was just tired of being in jail. Tired of being treated like a number and people come violate your cell, just flip your mattress over, tear your stuff up. I was tired. I didn't want to be like that anymore.
77% of women are rearrested within 9 years. The question that I had was why? My name is Messiah Rhodes. I'm a filmmaker on a personal journey to understand why so many women keep cycling back into incarceration and how my mom managed to find her way out. This was filmed months before the COVID-19 pandemic and the uprising over the killing of George Floyd. But the problems that plague the prison system, like systemic racism and the neglect of vulnerable populations, are even more visible now. Before I turned 14, I contemplated suicide. One night, climbing out of my bedroom window, I stood on the roof, waiting for that muscle urge to jump, hoping my purpose would be found in the afterlife. Instead, I found purpose in dancing and filmmaking. Breakdancing, popping, locking, just moving my body in some way became therapy for me as a teenager. While my mom was in and out of jail, I was forced to find my own way, but as it turned out, she was also trying to find a way back to me too.
Monique, as you know, was an addict for almost 20 years.
When I'm out there using, I just say to myself, this can't be my fate. This can't be my fate, you know what I'm saying? And it wasn't.
That's her in a news interview from 2008. She had been out of jail for 3 years and was starting to rebuild her life. But to do that, she had to work through a broken system, one that makes it very difficult for women to get back on their feet after being locked up. What kind of things you see in jail?
No, it wasn't a good place to be sick, that's for sure. Not in jail. They make you wait to see the doctor, and then the doctors only do but so much.
My mother has suffered her whole life from mental and physical illness.
This is my insulin. I take it 3 times a day, 25 units. You know, I found out like 4 years ago I was diabetic. All the times I was in the streets, I had no clue.
Jails are mandated by law to provide medical assistance to their inmates. There is no formal oversight of the quality of services. Inmates often have to pay extra fees and co-pays. As for my mom, it wasn't until her 4th and final time in jail that she received any kind of serious treatment.
No, I was sick when I got there.
Oh, okay.
But they didn't get better because they made me wait. I was on a mental rehab tier the last time.
And how was that? What kind
It was all right. Everybody was medicated on that tier.
So was it
medicine
therapy and medication, or was this?
No therapy.
It's just medication.
Just medication, yeah.
The lack of adequate health care has a profound impact on women, both while they're locked up and when they're released. A clinic in New Orleans called Formerly Incarcerated Transitions, or FIT Clinic, is trying to help by providing medical services to men and women coming out of the prison system.
When you're coming out of incarceration, the number of priorities that you have, you know, you're trying to just have a place to stay. Do you need to pay for that? Do you need to pay for food? Do you need to pay for clothes? You know, healthcare becomes the least important priority.
Why is healthcare important to prevent recidivism?
When you're sick and you have illnesses, sometimes people try anything to help themselves, and sometimes that results to crime.
Danielle Metz was granted clemency by President Barack Obama in 2016 after serving over 23 years for a nonviolent drug offense. Now, she works as a community health worker for FIT Clinic.
So whatever they need coming out, like counseling, substance abuse, we have contacts that we can call these people and help them and get them connected.
When I was incarcerated, I did try to kill myself twice. The loss of my son, the loss of my way of life, the loss of my daughters. With the support of FIT Clinic, LaVon Wiley was able to reunite with her 2 daughters. I can't go back to those depression moments and those suicidal moments where I was so close to taking my life. I have to be better for my children. I still got 2 daughters I got to live for. And I want them to know that although life may throw curveballs and you may be down and out, you know, I used to say in jail, this is a minor setback for a major comeback. So that's what I'm doing.
Women like my mom, who suffer from both mental illness and substance use disorders, have a higher chance of returning back to jail. Treatment centers like Fit Clinic could be one of the missing links for these women. For my mom, it wasn't until she got into a treatment program that she turned her life around.
They were going to send me upstate this time, and I told my lawyer to get a program, and it was Phoenix House.
Mm-hmm.
The guilt was eating me alive.
Mm-hmm.
Guilt and shame, the things that I was doing.
After over 15 years in and out of jail, she has a stable home. She curbed her addiction and got custody of my little sister, Emma. Then, she reconnected with me, but many women find reconnecting with family difficult.
Before incarceration, I only had one child, and he was 3. And I was pregnant when I was indicted by the feds. And then I did 5 years in prison, and then I was released, and now I have 2 big children. So I didn't really know how to handle that, because it was like I was thrown right back into motherhood.
Tiffany Volkin was not only separated from Isaiah, but she was pregnant and gave birth to a second son, Bryce, while locked up. An estimated 80% of women in jail are mothers. Nearly 150,000 of them are pregnant when they arrive. Both the parents and the children affected by the criminal justice system need special resources to cope. An after-school program in Brooklyn called Children of Promise provides specific support for that.
Good afternoon, everyone. How's everybody doing? Good.
When the parent is released, then we work with them in the reunification, because one may have what their idea of what when I come home is going to look like, and then the child has an idea of what it's going to look like when mom or dad comes home, and neither might be based in reality.
It's estimated that over 5 million kids have a parent behind bars at some point. That's 1 in every 14. But more than statistics, like all these kids, it was my childhood. What do you do here?
Well, I do therapy here. We do art therapy in a group. We do gym. I've been in therapy for like 3 years now. Currently in therapy, I'm writing a story about my life. By the way, my brother's, he's 7.
He's 7, yeah.
His name is Bryce.
Mm-hmm.
Usually you grow with your children, and I didn't have the opportunity to do that, so this place actually this program really helped me with that, like more than anything.
Tiffany has just begun her journey of being a mother again. For my mom, that started in 2005. That was the first time I met my little sister, Emma. It felt like a family disappeared out of nowhere after so long.
On this wall, I have art, like all of my walls from different grades, like 5th grade, 4th grade. This is Korean. I taught myself too. And these are all...
So you're teaching yourself Korean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And
just casually?
Yeah, just casually.
So what would you say to kids who get separated from their parents and they're back together and they're still dealing with the emotions? What would you say to those kind of kids?
I think it's good to maybe try and give them a chance. Like, even though you might not want to, or you might not be able to, you should try, because, you know, you only have 2 parents.
I also feel to have Emma all these years and hanging out and raising her, and like, how's that been feeling?
It's awesome. You know, she thinks she's my boss. It's awesome. First, I was afraid to be a mom because I haven't been a mom so long to my other 2 children. I realized God gave me another chance to be a mother.
My mother and I are in a much better place now. But I feel like my childhood and teenage years was stolen from me, and I'm still recovering from that. My mother, my siblings, and I are processing the trauma of separation. We are in uncharted territory, trying to figure out what normal families do. We never had a chance to experience something like a family photo. This is our first one, and we are learning to take care of each other in the world, post-incarceration. Love, the Rhodes family.
Messiah, this piece is so powerful. Thank you for being so open in the film, and thank you for being so open with us tonight. There was a question in the chat about the impact of the film on your relationship with your mother. And I think, I didn't take this question ahead of time because I think this section starts to address that. But I was wondering if you wanted to elaborate on that. I know only so much fit into these segments that you aired on AJ Plus. So was there anything else you wanted to elaborate on? What's it like now for you and your family?
Yeah, I mean, it's I guess it's also like just a critique of like kind of like media literacy in some ways. Like, what is the impact of like people filming this and putting it out there? Is it really going to be like detrimental to how we talk to each other? Is it really going to impact how we live? And in a lot of ways, it doesn't. People think it does. People wait in lines for American Idol for hours and hours to sing for one time. So, I don't feel like it has really much of an impact on our relationship. I feel we're still working through the same things we've been working through before the documentary and then after. So it's always gonna be a process. So
thank you for sharing that. I think there are some folks looking, also posting questions on Facebook and bringing them forward to us. So people can just jump in on our team if you have some of those questions that you want to bring forward. Brenda, I know you're monitoring Facebook as well. I wonder, there was another question about process and how you talked a little bit about making this piece and how it was longer and got consolidated into these two segments. But even further back, did you approach AJ Plus about this? Did they approach you? If there was a pitch, what was it like?
Oh yeah. So AJ Plus did approach me. I was like, so if people like watch my stuff on kind of Vice TV, Viceland, or like even Democracy Now, I mean, like Vice was kind of like funny, eating like about food safety or Black history in a funny way, but really serious, but like educational. And so for me, the pivot to like kind of like my deep personal narrative, it was more inspiration from my mom. Like I said before, it was like she did it first. She was in a local little newsletter in Suffolk County, and if people know about Suffolk County and Long Island, there's like, weird towns that just recently took off like weird anti-Semitic laws for people to have for Jews to have housing and stuff like that. They have Garden City finally a lawsuit in 2018 for residential housing discrimination. They wouldn't even give rich Black people houses in Garden City because they were Black. So Long Island is a way different situation to be incarcerated and deal with the law enforcement in New York and Long Island compared to New York City, which people be more illuminated to because of the Trump election and stuff. But that's where my mom was dealing with her situation. So, so for a long time, she was lost in that system. So, but the fact that she was honest about her ability to like see what was going on and like reclaim her individual, her life and her family, and her rights to like be a person in America. That's what like motivated me to like tell the story the most, So she was the deep motivation for it.
Thank you for that, Messiah. We are joined today not only by you and your film, but we have this panel of amazing advocates here in New York State who are working on issues that relate to your film. We have Nicole Cook-Reed from Freedom Unshackled, Roni Minter from Sisters Healing Old Wounds and Freedom Unshackled, and Thomas Kearney from RAP, or Releasing Aging People from Prison. I wonder if this would be a good time to start to bring these folks in and to tell us a little bit about their stories as well. And then we can open up the conversation with the participants here in a broader sort of way. So just to, maybe what I will do is introduce each participant in the briefest of ways, and then each of you can elaborate on what you want to share about your own personal stories and your own advocacy work today in about like 5 minutes apiece. So first, I'm going to toss to Nicole Cook-Reed, who served 10 straight years in prison. She is a mom and an advocate working with a group called Freedom Unshackled. Freedom Unshackled is a coalition of different advocates with a goal is to advocate for more uniformed, universal use policies and procedures within the Department of Justice. And I feel like, Nicole, you could probably talk about Freedom Unshackled much better than I can, and also talk about your own personal experience of how you became an advocate with Freedom Unshackled. So I'd like to first welcome Nicole Cook-Reed to this conversation and give you some time to tell us your story.
Thank you, EP. Thank you, everybody, for having me. So Freedom Unshackled, as EP spoke about, is a coalition. It's a group of like-minded individuals from a variety of backgrounds. And basically what we do is we come together and we advocate for laws around criminal justice reform. So we're not really trying to change laws and make laws, but we're trying to hold the government and legislative officials accountable for the laws that are already in place. So for example, clemency is one of the big ones that we're working on. And we know that the governor has the right to do clemency anytime he wants. But our current governor, Cuomo, who I actually like, has only done a minimal amount of clemency. So we have currently over 1,800, I believe it is 1,800 applications on the governor's desk for clemency. And we need him to do more when it comes to that. He also campaigned around clemency. So again, it's about accountability. That's one example of what our coalition, Freedom Unshackled, is doing. We're promoting any type of laws that need to be, that are already in place, that we're trying to just hold the legislative bodies accountable for doing more of. So for me, obviously EP spoke about me being formerly incarcerated. My situation, Messiah and I were talking a little earlier, I was 17. So I was a child and a parent when I was arrested. And I did 10 years in New York State. I did Bedford Hills Correctional Facility between Bedford and Albion Correctional Facility. Those were the two facilities that I did my time in. And so I was my first time ever arrested, never knew anything about the criminal justice system, but I was taken from my natural element and put into a situation where I kind of had to figure out a new normal. And obviously with the pandemic now, we all know that that's a very scary situation, trying to navigate what is now a new normal. And so just trying to be a mother and a daughter incarcerated is something that, you really don't know how to be. I mean, I was lucky enough and blessed enough to have my parents to take care of my daughter. She was 3 when I was incarcerated, and I came home, she was 13. And so, like in Messiah's film, he talked about the struggles that his mother had, because there are really not a lot of resources available for formerly incarcerated people, and especially women. And so I am grateful that I had women before me that had left prison. And when I did finally get released in 2007, they were able to kind of support me into getting on my feet. So mind you, I was 17 when I got arrested, and I was 27 when I came home. So I had no legal history, no job experience, nothing to kind of set me up for success, even though I was told that was what was expected of me. I was on parole. And so that's what the parole officer says. This is what you need to do and figure out how to do it. They don't give you any tools to do it, but this is what the expectation is, or you'll go back to prison. So, like I said, luckily for me, I have women who left before me and they supported me. I was able to hook up with agencies like the Correctional Association of New York. I got a job 4 months after my release, making $15 an hour, which was, a really good thing for me back in 2007. And after that, I was able to get my own apartment, worked really hard. I successfully, I had 5 years on parole, but I successfully completed within 2 years and was cut off parole early. And fast forward to now, I'm a homeowner. I bought my home in Suffolk County. We'll talk about Suffolk County, Long Island. I live on Long Island in Suffolk County and Brentwood area. I'm a supervisor. I am a business owner. I am a real estate investor. I'm a registered voter. I'm everything that society says I should not be. And I am just grateful that, I was able to accomplish these things because, it wasn't set up for me to succeed. But it is important. That's why the work that I do, I advocate for, because everybody won't have my opportunity. Everybody won't have my situation. Everybody is not set up for success. Everybody doesn't know how to navigate and get the resources. So it's important that I continue to be that voice for the ones that are behind the wall, that want to get a chance to come home and do right, and basically continue to do what needs to be done so that we can reform criminal justice.
Nicole, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing. And I hope that after we make our line down through the different panelists, we'll be able to ask you some more questions and you can engage in dialogue with Messiah as well as your co-presenters.
Thank you.
Pass this over to Roni Minter. Roni is the founder of a couple organizations, include Sisters Healing Old Wounds, and a co-founder of the group we just heard about, Freedom Unshackled. Roni, I've had the honor to interview as well on the Hudson Mohawk magazine, and I'll share a link with that about Sisters Healing Old Wounds if people want to listen to that later. But Roni, you say your focus has always been on forgotten populations and incarcerated and formerly incarcerated women. You live your life to fight for justice, especially those who were touched by the criminal justice system. Roni, I wonder if you could take some time, as Nicole just did, and share some of your story of who you are and how you got to where you are today.
Thank you. First of all, Messiah, your documentary was amazing, and thank you for sharing that, and thank you for allowing me to have the experience of getting to know you and your mom and your sister. So thank you for that. I'm a formerly incarcerated woman, and it was just hard for me to say woman. I don't know why, but I was formerly incarcerated. And let's just skip to the 2003 incarceration. I started noticing what you call the KSAT, the alcohol and substance abuse counselors that ran programs, facilitated programs within the dorms. It was a living dorm. And I started noticing how when they would open a woman up, let's say they're talking about grief, and a woman is telling her story, she's maybe talking about her mother, her son, her grandmother, somebody. And soon as the 3:45 movement bell rang, that counselor would grab her pocketbook, her coat, and leave that woman with all this stuff hanging out of her and just go home, right? Then come in the next day and wonder why this woman is now in lock. Well, you left her open, you didn't close her up. You left her to leak all those feelings all over the dorm, and she got in trouble overnight, right? So I saw this, and I used to listen to, you know, one of the worst sounds being incarcerated is to be at nighttime when the lights go out and someone in your dorm just found out that a family member has passed away. You will never hear a worse sound while being incarcerated. And so those traumas, those things led me to go to Mr. Siegel, who was our civilian worker at REACH. I was an HIV AIDS peer counselor. And I started talking to him about an idea I had for a group where the woman could come in a safe space outside of the regular program that docs provided and talk for real about childhood traumas. And so he told me to think about it, give him an outline. And so me, Carly, I have to give everybody credit that's due. Carlene Covington and Pauline Toussaint, we would go out to the yard every day. That's where we met because we didn't live in the same unit. And we came up with the name Sisters Healing Old Wounds because we were all sisters regardless of backgrounds, race, whatever. We were sisters and we needed to heal some wounds. And so we went to Mr. Siegel again and we presented it, and the AIDS Institute liked the idea, they liked the concept. So they added that to the cooperative agreement that they had with Rules Opportunity. So we started facilitating the group. The group is actually still going on today, only in Albion Correctional Facility, but it has the longest waiting list of any volunteer program in the Department of Corrections. But in that group, we really tapped on some things. Women were still holding on to child molestations, rapes, being in foster care, being abandoned, being beaten by their spouses or whomever, prostitution. And this was a space where we can really talk about these things. And we knew without a shadow of a doubt what we talked about down there. We wasn't held to all these other rules and regulations that docs had in place, but there was a sense of confidentiality in that space. And so we did that. And we just were unique to have Mr. Siegel, who is just an amazing person, to be our civilian worker. So he allowed us that. Fast forward, when I came home, and I keep thinking about the women, and I kept thinking about how programs like, not organizations, but entities like Oasis and stuff like that, Parole, they tend to be more male focused. Oasis can have a house, and Oasis is the Office of Substance and Abuse. They're the governing body of most licensed programs in the state of New York. And those programs would give maybe 25 beds to a program where 15 beds or 20 beds would be for men and 5 beds would be for women. Parole would give parole houses where 18 beds would be for men and maybe 4 or 5 beds be for the women. So I kept thinking about this imbalance with women. So I went back to I called Mr. Siegel, who's my mentor. And at the time I was chair of the New York State HIV Prevention Planning Group. So I knew the people of the AIDS Institute. And I asked him if I could have my name back, Sisters Healing Old Wounds. And in 2011, Sisters Healing Old Wounds was born and we became incorporated. And initially, the thought was going to do one-on-one. We were going to do like direct care. And we started out with a dignity bag initiative because we all know, if you formerly incarcerated, you know about that $40 of the bus ticket that they give you at the gate. That's not enough. If you're coming all the way from Albion to go all the way to Manhattan, you're not going to have that $40 by the time you get home. And further, if you have to go out to Long Island, like out by where Nicole lives in Suffolk County, you're not going to be able to afford to even get home almost if you have to stop and get something to eat. And for women, what if they need personal items? So the AIDS Institute gave us some initiative money. We started a Dignity Bag Initiative, and we got these bags in the hands of most programs that have women coming home from correctional facilities. We have a hotline that's still going on today. We have a hotline for formerly incarcerated women. We do provider trainings where we have conversations with people who work with incarcerated and formerly incarcerated women, and they come and we talk to them about what our needs really are. Because a lot of times when people come home, they don't ask us on these intake paperworks, well, what happened to you while you're incarcerated? They want to know about our mother and father's alcoholism. They want to know what your great grandmother did, but they don't ask you about the time that you just spent, the family that you just left, the years that you just spent. Did you get raped while in there? Did you get beat up while in there? They don't ask you those questions on the intake paperwork. So I saw a gap in services with the women, and we started to try to fill those gaps. So Sisters Healing Old Wounds, along with Freedom Unshackled, tries to address those gaps. And much like Nicole said, we're not trying to change or introduce laws. We're trying to get the laws that are already in place actually adhered to, have them actually do it. So while Sisters Heal Old Wounds is unique to just incarcerated and formerly incarcerated women, Freedom Unshackled is not. We work for, and we do everything for incarcerated, formerly incarcerated, and for people who are at risk of being incarcerated. So we're looking at the criminal justice system in a whole. At the same time, being supportive of other organizations throughout New York and the rest of the country, and trying to be a clearinghouse for those organizations and have people get linkage through them, for them through us. That's the long and short of it. I am also a mother, and I left my children at home when I did my incarceration. Much like Nicole, I was lucky to have my mother and father who were able to take care of my son and daughter. However, I am now a grandmother who's raising my granddaughter. I've had her all of her 11 years. I'm hopeful with God's grace and mercy that we could break this cycle here with my granddaughter. So when she has her children, God willing, she's able to raise her children in a healthy way without having to not have them with her. I have cheated myself and my children out of their youth. So I understand that, but at the same token, much like Messiah, my son has absolutely been very happy with all the positive things that I've done in my life since coming home in 2005. And I made a promise that that was not going to happen again. It was over for me. So thank you.
Roni, thank you for sharing this, for sharing your work and your story. As people have questions, feel free to start popping them into the chat. We'll open this up for discussion in just a bit, but I really feel like your work sort of echoes these services and work that formerly incarcerated folks that Messiah highlighted in his documentary. They sort of, your life and your work echo those that he highlighted, and you could have almost been another person that he highlighted in his documentary. So thank you for sharing that. Next, we have Thomas Kearney. He is an organizer for the Capital Region with RAP, Release Aging People in Prison. And here in the Capital Region, you've worked on those issues around elder parole, fair and timely parole, and you're out there with Vocal New York, you're out there on local issues. You yourself are also formerly incarcerated and served almost 17 years. And I don't want to tell your story for you. So Thomas, you're an amazing local organizer as well here in the Capital Region. And thank you for joining us today in this conversation.
Thank you for having me. I also want to thank Messiah Rhodes for putting this together. This is the documentary was awesome. And I want to take a moment to recognize both Roni and Nicole for the amazing work that you're doing there in the Capital Region. I mean, especially the way it's focused on the women, because when we're talking about mass incarceration, a lot of times the women get lost in the conversation. They get drowned out because most of the people who are locked up are men, and the services that you're providing for them are essential and awesome. Like you said, I am a Capital Region organizer for RAP. We organize personally impacted families and those who are formerly incarcerated around two bills, elder parole and fair and timely parole. We get our bills are transformative of the whole parole system. When you say releasing aging people from prison, a lot of people think that that's a population that we're only focused on, but that's the population that our founder was focused on. One of our founders, Messiah Rhodes, who today is actually the second anniversary of his passing. Elder parole basically says that anyone who's 55 years and older and has served at least 15 consecutive years in prison has an opportunity to be reviewed by a board. It doesn't mean that you automatically get out. It doesn't mean it's not a get out of jail free card. It just means that there's an opportunity for your sense of personal transformation to be recognized. Fair and timely parole, which works hand in hand with that, says that when you do go before the board, whoever they is, when your parole time comes up, that the parole board has to evaluate you based on the individual that you are and not the individual that you were when you made the worst decision on the worst day of your life. And that's important. One of the things Fareed has seen in his incarceration, he wound up serving 33 years off a 15 to life sentence, which is ridiculous. The parole board gave him more time than the judge gave him on the front end. And that's what we're realizing. We're realizing that the parole board is basically, as it's set up now, is for vengeance. And it's not attempting to help or correct anything that we see in society. With RAP, what we do is like I said, we organize personally impacted families. Just speaking like for what's going on now with COVID, like we just held a statewide rally outside of a couple prisons as the COVID rates started spiking, as we knew they would in that environment where it's impossible to socially distance. Prison guards decide that they don't want to wear a mask, so they're not going to put one on, and our families and we're at risk. So we held rallies outside of Elmira Correctional Facility where almost, 40%, no, I'm sorry, 30% of the population was infected. That's horrible. It's a situation where, I mean, the only people who really care about what's happening there are people who have been there. And as you said, I've been there. And the time that I spent mostly around the elders, the people that we are trying to get out. And those are the most vulnerable right now. We've asked, even before Corona, for the governor to grant clemencies, to attempt to release more people, even the most vulnerable. He made like some type of nursing home jail instead up in Adirondack, right there by the Canadian border. And I mean, immediately, COVID infections. These are individuals that could be home. They could be with their families where they're safer. They could be mentors out here in the same way that they were mentors to me when I was in prison. I mean, a lot of this, the violence that we see in the Capital Region, it could be deterred by some of these individuals being home and acting as credible messengers to kids who are going down the same road that they went. Instead, we see the legislator and the governor in an election year making very poor decisions, and people are dying because they don't want to look soft on crime. it's a tough situation. But what we like in New York City on what is it? Oh, the 23rd. Sorry. They're going to be holding a rally outside of the governor's mansion. I'm going to drop the link to that in the chat, as well as a link to our Google form. If anyone here would like to get involved in our work, you could put your information in there, and someone, whatever region that you're in, we'll hook you up with the organizer in that region. There's if you're on Long Island, if you're in Hudson Valley, we just hired 2 awesome new organizers that are in the Hudson Valley and on Long Island. So I mean, moving forward, it's upsetting that the Capitol's closed right now, but it probably would be closed anyway. But we're having a hard time talking to legislators, but we're doing meetings by Zoom. We've already got multiple co-sponsors on both of our bills, and we're hoping that in the next legislative session, we can get some more work done. We can move forward just a little bit more and, get some people home, keep some people safe. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Thomas, and all of you, Roni and Nicole and Messiah. I think this is a time now that we can open up again for questions. So if people have questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat. We'd love to talk about them with you. Laura Whitehorn posted that the details of the rally that Thomas just referred to. And much earlier on in the first hour, Luce, who has been so nice and encouraging here to everyone in the chat, had a question about what type of programming is happening now under the backdrop of COVID in prisons. And I don't know if anyone wanted to take that on in answering that for her that we sort of skipped over earlier. Thomas, did you want to answer that?
Somewhat. But because every facility is different, it depends on what facility that the individual is in. There are a couple facilities that are completely locked down now because COVID rates had spiked. I believe Elmira and Auburn are 2 of them. They're doing some programming. Some schools are still open. Of course, they're still running CoreCraft because, God forbid, Docs gives up some money. But a lot of the stuff that's supposed to be therapeutic and for prisoners is not running at the moment. I mean, I'm really not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing because I'm worried for the people that are in there, especially since they just started mass testing, and I doubt they're going to continuously do it because it costs money. It's hard to tell, but the short answer is depending on the facility. You have to check with each facility independently because Docs doesn't have a standard for statewide how to handle the situation.
Thank you, Thomas. Messiah, as you hear like these different panelists start to briefly talk about their stories, I wonder what comes up for you. I know you met a whole host of people across this country as you were making Against All Odds, and many of them didn't actually make it into your final documentary. So I was wondering, if you were to, now engage with these panelists or almost interview them for your project, what would you want to know that hasn't been covered around the work that they're doing here locally?
I mean, I guess New York State is its own, as we learned during the pandemic, even more kind of in an accelerated way, just how almost every state, every county, every region has its own way of governing in some ways. We learned that when it comes to the public health policies that are being passed. So, even if you're looking from outside, don't know about mass incarceration, you probably can assume at this point, I guess the jails might be different. The prisons might be different. The way the law enforcement might be different. You know, when I lived in Virginia and Washington D.C., it felt like there was like it felt like everyone had a law enforcement agency. It felt like the Parks Department had law enforcement, the Mint, the Treasury Department, the state, you know, the street cleaners. Everyone had a law enforcement officer, a law enforcement company. So as we deal with mass incarceration in New York State, I just feel like for me, there's always a question like this: what reentry services like that exist now, like when it comes to like, because I hear stories either like a lawyer might tell someone about a housing situation or so when it came out, when you first experienced on incarceration, like how is it finding employment, how is it finding, you know, that first job that made you get income, like what was that experience, you know, for everyone, for Roni, for Nicole, for Thomas? I just feel like the fundamental experience of like finding that first job after many interviews, after like whether it was a bunch of interviews or just one interview, you know.
Well, for me, Messiah, like I said, I was lucky enough to have like formerly incarcerated women that came home before me, that kind of look back when they came home. And so I was given an opportunity, like I said, with a program called the Correctional Organization of New York, Correctional Association, I'm sorry, of New York. And I did an internship with them at first. And they do a lot of advocacy. They work with individuals that are incarcerated and formerly incarcerated. So I did a internship with them first, and they liked me and my work ethic. We would go to Albany and legislation buildings and stuff like that and advocate for criminal justice reform. And then I got a paid position, like I said, 4 months after my release, my first job ever. And they started me at $15 an hour. And like I said, back in 2007, I don't even know what the minimum wage was, but that was like a big deal for me because I was like, I got a job and it's like a real job with like real money. So you know, like I said, everybody doesn't have those opportunities. If they had, and that's why the advocacy work that we do is so important, because we need more agencies like that you know, that give women, or you know, and men, but you know, mostly women, because like you said, women are kind of like the smaller of the population at the services that they have now that they provide. I was really surprised that they didn't have more things for women, because the stipulations on parole are just the same as men. You know, they expect you to get a job. They expect you to do program. Like, you know, I didn't even have a drug history or, you know, incarceration history. And I had to do parole, had made me do a drug program, outpatient drug program. So like, it just, a lot of the things that they ask you to do, they don't set you up for success. So I just feel like the advocacy work that we have to do, it has to really make sure that we continue to be loud voices for the men and women behind the wall, so that we can really set them up for success. As far as I go, I was uniquely lucky because I fit a lot of demographics, right? I'm Black, I'm a lesbian, or transgender. Ask me which day it is, I'll tell you what I am. I'm an ex-addict, ex-con, college educated, middle-class family. So I came from a lot of things that people could check off on their boxes. So it was easy for me to obtain work because grants kept asking them to hire people with my background, right? And if you really ask a lot of people, because of my lifestyle and my drug abuse, I was high risk for HIV, right? So I was checking off all kind of boxes. And so you know, I don't know if any of you ever heard of Father Peter Young, but my introduction to working in the addictions field and HIV field and really getting my feet wet came through the opportunities afforded to me through Father Peter Young. I will never, ever, ever give another person besides myself credit for helping me the way Father Peter Young did. And not for nothing, I know a lot of people say, oh, you know, I'm all into, as you can see, Black power and everything. Though that white man opened doors for me, nobody else thought of opening doors for me and supports me even to this day on his sick bed. And so I can call Father Young right now and say, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? And he will give me his honest opinion, or he'll tell me to go for it. So every step of the way, everything that I've done, when they somehow the New York State, what do you call it? New York State minister, what do you call it? Public health, whoever he was, he appointed me to the New York State HIV Prevention Planner Group. I had no clue what they were. He had just heard about my work. Another door was open because I fit all these demographic check boxes. And as a result of being on a PPG, I then became chair of the New York State HIV Prevention Planner Group. And I was going all over the country presenting workshops and seminars and pushing the idea of reentry and what that looked like for women coming home who are high risk for HIV infection or at risk or HIV positive. So I had the opportunity to start pushing their agenda and start pushing my agenda at the same time, going around the country, listening to other people and meeting some amazing advocates in this work. I was able to start making a lot of connections with doors. I mean, literally like Daison Dixon down in Atlanta with the sister house down there. She's an amazing person. The people over at the National Minorities and AIDS Council, like just presenting over and over again at United States Conference of AIDS. Matter of fact, I pushed so hard for an AIDS agenda that I started getting offers for these high-paying jobs. However, I didn't fit one criteria. I'm impacted, I'm affected by HIV, but I'm not infected with HIV. So I didn't fit that criteria. So some jobs I couldn't take, right? But I almost fit just about everything else. And that was a passion of mine for a very, very long time. For about 6-7 years, all I did was work on things related to HIV. But then once I branched away from Father Young and started Sisters Healing Old Wounds, I narrowed my focus to just women. And so that became my point of reference, but it was extremely easy for me. It's easy right now. I am asked almost regularly, do I want this position? Do I want that position? Because of my life experiences. And I don't have a problem talking about it, because once I put it out there, what are any of you going to do with it? So I don't mind getting this off my chest. And it's a healing process. And I learned that from the people that helped me along the way.
Oh, sorry about that. I'm just gonna add to that and say I was lucky as well in the fact that I knew people who could probably get me into somewhere. When I first got out, it was harder after the 10, but it's difficult when you're told to do something and you know that it has to be done. Like the first thing they tell you to do is to get a job. They want you to get a job. But everyone, they have this like standard parole sheet where everyone's pretty much got the same parole regulations, no matter what you did. I mean, there's something different for other special types of crimes, but basically it's the same thing. I mean, they want you to get a job, but they're not allowed to drive without permission. Why? I have a valid driver's license. It doesn't make any sense. And so when it came to employment, I don't think employers know or realize how disheartening it is to get repeated denials. It's hard. It's extremely hard. And for anyone who's just coming out, I mean, it's a really bad situation for anyone to be in. To want to do good, and just because that you have, I mean, you've already done your time, your sense of personal transformation is real, and you're ready to get on with your life, but you know, society isn't still over it yet. They still want to hold you back. That's where I mean, ban the box if it ever comes to fruition. It's a good thing. I cannot even I know there's so many job interviews that I didn't get just because I checked the box. They don't want to hear the explanation. They don't care what happened, how long ago it was. Yes, you were convicted of a felony. No, we don't want you here. It's hard.
So for the next thing I want to like think about for Roni, Nicole, and Thomas is about healthcare inside though. You know, the fact that like you hear stories about doctors can prescribe all kind of medications and they can prescribe a whole long list of medication. And then when you get out, it's almost like it never happened, you know, because that doctor wasn't even like certified in the first place. You hear stuff like that. You hear like, you know, people don't believe their sick calls, you know, even though it's supposed to be a constitutional right for inmates to have healthcare, but what kind of, so I want to tie into like kind of the Zoom questions, like what kind of like legislation, what kind of like, you know, things you've been seeing to move forward with healthcare, especially during the pandemic now when it comes to inside?
So there's a lot of layers to that. Depending on what facility you're in, is depending on the healthcare you get, right? I felt while I was in Bedford, I got really poor healthcare, right? But I felt when I moved to Albion that I got really good healthcare, right? I mean, that's the one thing that they did good in Albion Correctional Facility. If I had to give them one thing that they did really well in the Albion Correctional Facility is they made sure there's no reason for anybody to come home without teeth. Well, these are my real teeth, just in case you want to know. But there's no reason for any setup, Nicole, because that's a big thing for me. I get mad when people come home and they don't have teeth because they will absolutely give you teeth in Albion Correctional Facility. They want to do that. They want to take those x-rays and do that. They were really big on making sure people were tested. They were really big on making sure, because the truth of the matter is in 2003, an entire unit almost had syphilis, including the 3 to 7 officer, right? So not syphilis, I'm sorry, herpes. So how does that happen, right? How does that happen? So they had to up their game on healthcare and education and the messages that we got, right? Now, I am currently having conversations with the sheriff here in Albany about the medical staff at Albany County Correctional Facility who consistently breaks HIPAA laws, who consistently breaks public health Article 27F, that's the HIV public health laws, who consistently disparage, they disparage the hell out of women. I personally have, you know, when you're a kid, you have little scars on your arm. Freaking nurse asked me, well, why are you scared of needles since you're such a junkie? Miss, I never shot a drug in my life, but what you don't know is I really know how to write. So I wrote her ass up, and she still has that write-up in her jacket. She had to answer that. You understand? I sat there and I wrote notes the entire time I was in Albany County Jail. I took those notes, and when I came home, I sent those notes to Sheriff Apple, and I said to him, you and me need to sit down because there's too many laws being broken in that jail. And so that's what started the conversation with me and him. But I have a girl right now who is COVID infected in that jail. She's not getting the care she needs at all. She had the COVID. She's having multiple medical issues. She was getting the care she needed in Bedford. She got transferred down here for an appeal, and now she's having all these issues, and Albany County Jail medical staff told her straight up they are not biting to Bedford to get her medical treatment. Take these Tylenols and go back to yourself. So depending on the facility that you were in, you know, is really according to, you can't put, that's not a blanket thing. That's not blanket. You know, it should be uniformed, but it's not. So just to really quick, to piggyback off what Roni said, she basically, you know, summed it all up. But like, I was grateful and blessed, I guess, that I didn't have any health issues while I did my 10 years. However, I did have some very near and dear sisters who did. right? And so with that being said, and these are true stories, like I've had women who I did time with would go out for a surgery, right? And come back with a missing body part, like that kind of stuff. Like true story. That's how the medical system is in the correctional association. I mean, sorry, the correctional DOC. So my concern is that if you're not, there's no oversight, there's no medical oversight when it comes to, like, you know, NYU Hospital or Stony Brook out here on Long Island, or, you know, even Harlem Hospital or Kings County Hospital. There's no oversight when it comes to these doctors. I don't even know if they're like real MDs or if they're like, you know, training, what do you call it, about physicians in training, medical students? I don't know, but there's no, I've seen too many hiccups, and I put those air quotes around hiccups, where people go in for just regular stuff and come back, you know, worse than when they left the unit. So that's just my experience with, and that would also bring people to say, like, you know what, I'm fine, I don't want to go, I'm not going to the doctor, I'm good, because it also was a fear factor that I would go for, you know, a cold or something small, and next thing you know, they're telling me I need heart surgery. So that's just my experience.
And just to, you know, like Nicole said, I found that a lot of the medical staff is not DOC, right? It's not part of docs, or it's not part of the county jails or the city jails. They're contracted. So Nassau County Jail can have a completely different contract with Suffolk County Jail versus Rikers Island versus Albany or Schenectady. So it's contracted. So when you get into trying to grieve or find out about a medical staff, sometimes that's beyond security. But it helps if you get security to put pressure on them. You know, just like Nicole said, I've seen girls go home and not come back, you know, go to hospitals and not come back. Or I literally watched them let a girl die in her cube. That happened in Albion. That, though, wasn't really on the medical staff. That was on security refusing to get her to the medical staff, right? Security refused to get somebody down to the unit or allow us, because we begged them. We begged Michelob, that's his name. We begged him to let us take her to medical. And he was a sergeant, and he would not let us take her. And that girl died right there in that cube.
Did you, what I can, just briefly, docs and docs as a whole, security staff, medical staff, are unconcerned with prisoner health. I mean, with prisoner health. Their mantra is supposed to be care, custody, and control. They only care about custody and control. They don't care about care. I mean, during the beginning of this whole COVID crisis, I'm sure everyone heard about the shortage of the breathing machines. I can guarantee you that there isn't a single one operating anywhere in docs. Prisoners who are found to be sick from COVID are thrown into solitary confinement. Yes. Solitary confinement there is no medical care. Solitary confinement is not conducive to medical care. You got a little window in the back of your cell and a little window in the front of your cell that opens up into a hallway that the CO only opens when he slides your tray through in order to feed you like the animal that they treat us as. It's ridiculous. I mean, we have numerous reports of people being denied medical care. Nurses don't even want to walk the rounds if it's locked down because, I mean, they don't want to get sick. At this time, it's worse probably than it was before COVID.
I can't even imagine what it's like now with COVID. I can't even imagine it. You know, the women, someone mentioned Corecraft, the women in Albion Correctional Facility have industry, which is Corecraft. And Nicole worked in industry, and they did painting and welding and, you know, all kinds of stuff at Corecraft. The governor wanted hand sanitizer, right? He took these women who never made hand sanitizer, forced them, instead of working, doing their welding and stuff, all the hand sanitizer that you guys get around here that says, can you see it? New York State hand sanitizer. This is made at, I know it's made at Albion, but I'm not sure what other, I know another mail facility makes it too. But literally, Albion Fire Department had to come and actually be in the industry building with them, because this is a high concentration of alcohol. And these are women who don't know what they're actually doing, who's getting told, learn as we go. But on the other flip side of that, you can't have this hand sanitizer. So I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna put myself at risk for it. I'm gonna get paid no more than 27 cents an hour for this great risk, but I can't even have this. And these are women who don't know.
So I want to move to like just like the big hashtag of the year 2020. One of the positive things which become positive, it's positive when it caused controversy, which is hashtag defund the police. So like I feel like a lot of our work, like Roni, Nicole, and Thomas, you guys have been doing that work even before that kind of phrase even became kind of a thing that people try to bottleneck everything into. But the idea that allocate these resources from law enforcement, from correctional, from the military, whatever, to go towards reentry services, to go towards supportive services. So can you guys just tell me about the kind of like, what does defund police, when you saw that hashtag is bustling after the George Floyd murder happened, and how did that affect you when it comes to your work? And how has that motivated you to work nowadays?
Well, for me, it was just more fuel to my fire. I mean, like we were talking early on before we came on, people get caught up in the verbiage, right? So defund, we need the cops. We're not saying we don't need the cops. That's not what the messages that we're putting out. We need the word defund for me means that we need the police to be, if you're not going to train them properly, obviously, put the money into training people with mental health diagnosis in the community, because sometimes a person is having symptoms and is acting out as it relates to their mental health diagnosis. Everything is not criminal, right? But if you're law enforcement, you can't really determine, or you're afraid, because that's always the word they use, fear. You're afraid because the person is acting violent or belligerent as it relates to a mental health symptom, right? So put the resources where they belong. If you can't determine a person being violent because of their mental health, or because they're violent because they have a knife or a gun or they're going to hurt you, then maybe you need to be trained in that, or have someone there to assess that, right? So defund the police is not saying we don't need 911. That's ridiculous. What we need is more resources, like you said, Messiah, in the community to help with different issues. Everything should not be a 911 police officer call, right? Even like what they said allegedly with George Floyd was fraud money or whatever that initially the phone call was about. That wasn't a 911 call. It really shouldn't have been, right? So we have domestic violence. We have a lot of different things, right? We need to have all of these kind of community resources, instead of having these big tactical teams and armored trucks. Like you see in armored trucks in New York and in the United States, it's weird. Like, it's not even, it's just weird and it's terrifying. So when people are saying defund the police, ask them what they mean. Like, we need the money that you're spending on that kind of unnecessariness, where people are getting tear gas because they're protesting, use that money to kind of put the supports and the resources for formerly incarcerated people that need a stepping stone when they come out, right? Those kind of things in every borough, in all throughout. Let's use the money that we're wasting on the police when we see this kind of stuff happening, put it back where it belongs, in our communities, helping the people.
I'm actually not a fan of defund the police. I think words matter, and I think they hurt a lot of Democrats across the country. I think what works in the Bronx might not work upstate New York and Western New York. I'm more for reallocating funds. Same thing, exactly what Nicole just described. It's the same exact thing. Move money from this, put it with mental health, put it here, put it there. So, and also, I don't believe cops need training. They knew not to hurt the white guy who went in to the AME church and shot up 9 people, right? They didn't need training for that. They knew not to hurt the guy who shot someone at the protest and walked past all kinds of police cars. They don't need training. They know what to do. But again, it's the disregard for Black life, because you have to consider us worthy of life to not want to kill us. So that's a whole nother conversation. Police do not need to be trained. They know exactly what they're doing. It's the culture of corrections. It's the culture of the Department of Justice. It's a culture that dates back, way back to the ownership of slavery when you had slave catchers. So that's the birth of the police department. So this is a conversation that's bigger than just this right here, right? But again, I think the words defund the police automatically put a shield up, and some people can't even hear you. They're not even engaged in the conversation, and you can't get past that word. And I wholeheartedly believe that this is what is going to cost us greatly. And unless we start really, if we really want to have a conversation about what needs to happen. And I understand some people are radical and they say, man, F the police and we need to do it like this. We need to do it like, I get that. But I'm a realist. And so having a conversation, I want to have a conversation. I can get the same result with the word reallocation versus defund. That's just my own spin on it.
I'm going to give a short example of a hometown where I grew up. It's Catskill, New York. It's in Greene County. And last year, Greene County was number 2 per capita in the state for opioid overdoses and overdose deaths. Community Need says you need more beds. There were only 12 recovery beds in that county. Yet, when they decided they want to borrow some money, they built a $38 million jail. They're not responding to community need in many different places. They're responding to pressure from unions, police officers and corrections officers. We need to hire more people, build your jail. At the same time, they closed the community center just recently. I mean, you build a jail, you close the community center, you're saying very clearly where you want the young, poor youth to be. And this is why, I mean, even though, this is why I joined other, in coalition with other organizations to attempt to slow down the over-policing in the capital region and in other places. And I attend all these new reinvention meetings because you don't get to Asian people in prison without first over-policing our neighborhoods. We see clearly what they're doing, and they're really not even trying to hide it anymore. They're really not trying to hide it. When that man killed George Floyd, over $20, he blatantly just smothered him to death in public. It's gotten to the point to where it's, I don't know if it was the last administration or what, but racism and the vitriol, it was just overtly against Black and brown. That's just what it was.
And what really ticks me off really is why now? Why George Floyd? Why not Sean Bell? Why not Sandra Bland? Why not that baby, man, Tamir Rice? Why did it take all of this? How could you not see an 11-year-old playing outside and see a cop say, I was threatened? How can you see a man in a car with his family and say, I'm threatened, and kill him? How does that happen? What was the boy's name? 90 99 bullets. What was it? 89, 99 bullets in a man from the Bronx? Way back when?
Amadou Diallo?
Yeah, that's him.
Yeah.
And then the rape, the sodomization of Avenue Louima.
Oh my God, I'm glad you caught that.
My God. Why George Floyd is my question. Why did it take all these years of visible abuse? We watched a girl get dragged, a kid get dragged by Houston police coming from a pool party, right? Why did it take all of, we've seen it right before George Floyd, black guy jogging, off-duty vigilante decide they want to just shoot him and kill him. He's jogging. So I am not, I get it, George Floyd may rest in peace. I'm so pissed about this uprising now. I'm pissed about it because many lives could have been saved if our allies would have done what they're doing now years ago. But at the same time, our allies need to understand that this is for us. You're our allies. This is not for you. And to be truthful, it is the allies that started the word defund police. That word didn't come from black folks. That came from our allies. But they will come here to Albany and say defund the police, and then they'll go home to Clifton Park and leave us without cops. Just like Nicole said, we still gonna need the police for some things, right? I mean, look, I can go all day on this. Let me get off.
But so one thing I want to get into, because like Roni, I love your perspective. It is like, oh, and this is a question for everyone. Nicole, is this like the long count of it? And like, I'm a sci-fi nerd, futurist, and the only because the reality of like the fact that we have the highest incarceration rate in the world in world history is like, what does a post-incarceration world even look like? And the closest thing you can even think remotely in world history at the moment that we know of is maybe Australia. Apparently, allegedly about 20% of like the population now in Australia, because the origins of Australia is pretty much Britain sent all these convicts from Britain, a lot of them. And then but at this point, years later, apparently about 20% of the population descendants of convicts in Australia. But for a long time, it took for this 20% to actually get integrated to society. It's actually a story, even these white folks, to figure out how to trust these people, how to integrate these people over a few generations. And that's the closest thing I can think of at all. And that's just white people upon English and British in Australia. So for me to relate that to the United States is like, what is a post-incarceration America when a generation from now, when the prisons is no longer 2.4 million, it's 100,000. It's just it's just Donald Trump and his friends in prison at that point. So it's like when we get to that world, I feel like in all of your work, abolitionist, it's that's the term, that's the coin term, and I feel like I feel that term is even more taboo than defund the police or abolish the police. Abolitionist is that's the term when you hit the wall, whoa, you're getting. So tell me about that term, because do you feel your work is a kind of an abolitionist type of work, when that legacy of work,
Personally, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. That is the absolute goal. And when you say abolitionist, a lot of people are like, well, what are you going to do after that? What do you mean? What are you going to do with people if there is no prisons? And I used to not like that question because I felt pressured to answer it. And then I realized I don't have to. We have to figure this out together. We can't do this in 5 minutes, a 5-minute conversation that we're going to have. It's been 400 plus years of prisons and this paradigm of perpetual punishment that everybody's come up with. I mean, you did something wrong, go sit in a steel box for 30 years. It doesn't make any sense, but we as individuals, as humans, have to come up with something better. There has to be something better. It's not a coincidence that at the same moment they started shutting down all the mental health hospitals, there's a prison boom. Why? Because people aren't getting the mental health care that they need. We have to be able to respond to the needs in the community. If we can't, we're gonna have a problem. I mean, if crime, they say crime doesn't pay, and that's bull. If crime stopped tomorrow in the US, we would see the worst recession that we'd ever seen in America. Think of all the prison guards and police. There are over 50,000 different police agencies in this country. 50,000. We are outnumbered. If every single one of them had no jobs tomorrow, what do you think would happen? We'd have to invent more crimes just to open up the prison system again.
Messiah, I wonder, I hate to jump in, but I also wonder if you could also share your thoughts on the hashtag defund the police. I know it's been a sort of backbone of some of your work these days.
Oh yeah. I mean, it goes. I think I just alignment of everyone. I just feel like even before I was even thinking about defunding police, I just thought like we talked about like why doesn't NYPD have robot dogs? How can Baltimore call upon Homeland Security to have drones fly over protesters? How they can have these resources? And I felt like during this pandemic, it was like a shock to everyone to see like the fact that this government, these counties, these cities can't give me money to stay home, but they can have like army of law enforcement everywhere to like tear gas people, to do all these different things. Like they have the amount of resources, and like it felt like it just felt like you live somewhere with someone, and then they bought all these weapons and all these guns and all these bazookas, and then you guys run out of food, and it's like, okay, what are you supposed to do with all this? And that's what it felt like. I felt like we were stuck with this like a punitive law enforcement state during a pandemic. And I think that was a shock to everyone this year to see that. And I feel that's where the reactionary kind of defund the police came from. It was like, wow, you have all these resources, you have all this, but you can't help us right now. And I feel that's where it came from. But my work from a long time, like the program that my mom went to, the mother and child unit my mom went to, that actually got her custody of my little sister again, that doesn't exist anymore. It stopped existing years ago, and that makes me think about, and everyone thinks about like the people that are being left behind because that program doesn't exist anymore, and that hurts the most when you think about it. So it's like that's where like my motivation of like these resources are necessary to keep the doors open for people, and that's where my motivation came from, when it comes to like allocating, when it comes to housing, when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to like paying for those phone calls for kids to call their parents, like all those things need to be supported,
I didn't mean to totally take over because I love the conversation you all are having. So if you want to continue it for a few minutes, Messiah, that would be great. If not, there are a few comments. There's a great conversation happening in the chat, but there's also a few questions that came up.
Yeah, we should bring the questions in. Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, some of them happened quite early on related to some action items. Rose, I hope you got connected with Thomas regarding your husband, and I hope maybe Thomas can reach out to you directly.
Yeah, I connected Rose. I gave Rose the information for a parole preparation project. Great.
And then Luz asked a question early on about how BLM across New York State can be more intentional about Black lives in prison. And there was also another question, an action item of how could someone welcome someone into their home who was recently released from prison? Are there services that connect families of people coming out of prison to families that would help and receive them here? I don't know, maybe you guys could choose who takes those questions.
I want to touch that Black Lives Matter one before we even, for me, before we even get to the Black Lives Matter movement in prison, women need to be recognized in the Me Too movement. Okay? For some reason, incarcerated and formerly incarcerated women, that's not even a blip on the radar when it comes to how many women have been violated over and over and over again, city, county, state, prison system. I shared with someone, my own parole officer, my former parole officer is currently doing time because he absolutely raped a female in the Capital District, one of his parolees. He's absolutely doing time for it. And so I just think the needs, of course, I mean, look, the majority of the jail are Black lives, right? The prison system is Black lives. So I don't, but they're not run by Black lives. They're not the ones who are in power, the Black lives. And so I don't know how that Black Lives Matter movement is going to look in a prison system, but I know there are some brothers in the prison system. And unfortunately, the men rally around each other more than the women. Because again, the Me Too movement, that power structure, that has to be addressed with the women. You know, it's just really bad. From beginning to end, you're violated. From the strip search, from the arrest and being patted down to everything about it. I'm already having conversations in a number of county jails about the lack of respect for women, and as I've been so disheartened about that hashtag Me Too since it started, because I have yet to hear one person, when they're speaking on a large platform, include and be inclusive about formerly incarcerated and incarcerated women. Maybe just to give props, I think Donna Hilton might have at that big women's rally in DC, but I don't recall her actually speaking specifically to women who are behind bars. So that's that. But the other part of the conversation, I have to think about that. So if anybody else wants to jump on that. Oh, I do want to say though, real quick, that prison industry is also caging children at the border. So let's remember that. Those are prison industries that are doing that.
I just want to say real quick in regards to Black Lives Matter in prison, I do believe that I think it should be a bigger force. But in order for that to happen, you have to understand the dynamics of prison. Like, they're not there yet. they're not there with any type of unified. I mean, if you've been paying attention, they're trying to say that Black Lives Matter is a racial, like, you know, one of those like racial groups now. Like they're trying to make it like, you know, Black Lives Matter is like one of those groups that are spewing racism, and which is absolutely not true. But you know, so I don't really think that, even though it is necessary, I don't really think that the correctional system is even going to be open to that Black Lives Matter, even though, like Roni said, the majority of the population are Black and brown people, unfortunately. As it relates to me as a person and an individual, I always believe that we just have to continue to fight for what is right. And if you talk to most people that are incarcerated, they just want to get home. You know, that's the first and foremost goal, is like to get their freedom. And so most of us that are advocates, we're trying to do that in a way that it happens safely and expeditiously. The ones like myself, Thomas, and Roni that are home and are advocating for individuals, we're just really trying to be that voice and get them home and get them home fast.
Could you go? That was a 3-part question. I lost part of it. Could you do that again for me, please? You asked
It was a couple of questions consolidated into one.
Yeah.
And one part that one person asked was, is there a way for a person, like, I guess an everyday person, because I don't know what a person like that person is like, to open their homes to recently released women to help them get on their feet? That was one question. And then another question was, you know, there's been an activated Black Lives Matter movement across the country, but this one directly relates to New York State. And how can that movement be better at supporting Black lives in prison?
Just by being vocal. I mean, the thing about Black Lives Matter is that it's a decentralized organization. You could print up t-shirts tomorrow and have a Black Lives Matter rally anywhere you want, and nobody's going to stop you. There's really not a core set of principles as in we believe in this and this is what we want done. And if they don't have individuals who are actually going to create those principles and say that Black and brown prisoners matter, then you're not going to have movement within that organization in order to, you know, recognize that prisoners are Black lives too, that deserve life and deserve to have their hopes and everything else.
Yeah, can I just respond to this? And I'm so sorry, I'm trying to listen because my son is a young filmmaker and he's been Messiah's work has been shared with him through Youth Effects. But as a local leader in the Black Lives Matter movement and a survivor of child sexual abuse, I just have to speak up. The movement for Black lives does have core principles. And I sent the link twice on the chats, and I would encourage you all to look at it. It has principles, it has fundamental values. They have representatives across the country in almost every state and in every region. And actually the Capital Region has about 3 core people who they link to, but that is very different than local leaders who are organizing across the country who choose to pick up the platform Black Lives Matter and not connect to the movement for Black lives. So while the movement for Black lives, you're right, is decentralized, there is a platform with visions, with, as for me, I participated in a piece that is around ending the war on Black women, because as a survivor of child sexual abuse and an abolitionist, that is where my expertise goes. There's other pockets of work that get done, and there's a whole cadre of people who are either formerly incarcerated or have been part of the anti-carceral movement in this country for years, like Angela Davis, like Barbara Smith, who gets pulled in for different reasons. And so I want to demystify that it doesn't have core values and core principles. There are groups locally that may not have core values and principles, but nationally, the movement for Black lives shares their core values, shares their demands, and each group is allowed to participate in that or not. So I just want to clarify that. And I also want to clarify that defund the police came from Black folks.
Are we talking about, because it's my understanding in Albany, I don't know where you're from, but I heard you mention Youth FX.
I live in Troy.
Okay, because it's my understanding, and I could be wrong, but because I dibble dabble in that part of it. That's under Cami. That's what I thought. I didn't think there was an actual Black Lives Matter here, and it might be people who work with, but they're really working through Cami.
Cami is an organizing group that many of you know because they've done work for some years around ending mass incarceration. And actually was there long before Black Lives Matter in 2014 even came out. But no, the Black Lives Matter Albany that was in existence back in 2014 till about 2017 dispersed. That was based out of Cami back then. Meet West and Troy, we've had 3 very high profile cases of Black people being shot or killed since 2015. And we have been organizing Troy for Black Lives since
Yes,
then.
capital area.
As an anti-rape activist myself, who works nationally and is connected to folks across the country, we have been pushing the violence against women movement to get away from mass incarceration and to think about transformative justice, restorative justice processes, and all of those great, amazing things that we have gotten through the years from people like Beth Ritchie, Dezon Diallo, in the HIV/AIDS and women's movement, and Angela Davis, and a whole host of other amazing leaders who are talking about there's different ways of dealing with sexual assault, violence against women, and could we adopt those things? And so I don't know if I answered your question, but the Troy for Black Lives has been in existence since 2017.
I know that I used to do a lot of work with Reverend Bako that was in Troy, and he did a lot of stuff around the violence and the this and the that. He was with the Fifth Avenue AME Zion Church and everything. Reverend Bako used to walk up and down 6th Ave and holding prayer visuals and stuff like that. But then he moved down south.
He did.
I'm not,
we didn't work with him. We did not work with him. Yeah.
Believe me, I understand.
I'm so sorry. We didn't work with him. We came
I believe
together.
you understand why.
Yeah,
But
we came together because the blood got shot in 2015. Then in 2017, Edson Thevenin got killed on the Hoosick. And then in 2017, what we call one of our own, which was Dominique McDonald, who grew up playing football with my 25-year-old son, and that's why we came together. And we came together with a very Black feminist political construct, and with one foot locally and one foot nationally connected to the movement for Black Lives. So our demands are linked to their demands. And all we did was make them localized because some of the stuff was not relevant to us locally.
Okay, thank you for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Do I know you, Luce?
You do. We know each other off of Facebook.
I thought so.
Yeah, we know each other. I'm so sorry because I'm not dressed. And I didn't mean to take all of this as my son.
Clarity's great. Clarity is always great.
Yeah, Messiah's work. And because
this makes it feel like we're in a church right now when this kind of stuff happens.
Some families go to church. My family organizes, and he's just been following your work and inspires to be a filmmaker. So he was sitting here, and then he's like, "Ma, you're writing too much." But I just want to demystify that, and I would encourage you all to go to that website and check it out. There's all types of there's a piece for women in prison. I also put in Survive and Punish, which does a lot for women in prison, and especially Black women. I can't speak for Tarana. I've known her dearly. A lot of us have called her to task around the impact of Me Too on Black women and girls, period, let alone Black women and girls in prison. But, that's a whole different kind of a conversation. But just know that there are many of us who are trying.
I would be remiss if I didn't say, in speaking to what Messiah is talking about, and speaking to what they're trying to do with rap, and different people are doing different things. Like I said earlier, in respect to Oasis and some of their outdated rules and regulations that might have worked fine for alcoholism and heroin addicts, they don't work fine for today's drugs, right? So sometimes we tend to lean on, with great love and admiration for our elders, but that stuff worked in the 60s and the 70s. And while we can learn from them and we can get some of their tools, it's becoming increasingly clear that it's not working in the millennium, right? And so sometimes I think what I'm encouraged by is the fluid and organic movement of the youth. They're just popping up. They're just starting stuff. I watched a girl who I never thought would do something, create something called Community Matters here. I never, in my wildest dream, did I see this coming from this one person. But not only did she create Community Matters, my granddaughter at our doctor's appointment today shocked me. She had on a mask that said Community Matters. So I'm so encouraged by the youth of today that really sparked a lot of these national movements. Those were kids just said, bump that, we coming in the street. right? And they started something on their own, so organic, without looking back, and they're doing something that fits their narrative today. I'm encouraged by that. Because look, I'm going to be gone soon. And even with Freedom Unshackled, Nicole can tell you, Nicole and I push our younger members to do a lot of the work. We really do. We push them to do almost everything, because at the end of the day, you guys are going to be the one to carry this forward. I want you guys to be the one. So a lot of work still needs to be done. I'm so encouraged, Messiah, by what you did. But I would also like to see that same kind of film coming more from the children or grandchildren of. Because see, this thing is now hopped over 2 generations. And what I saw in the street were the grandchildren of a lot of my peers that was incarcerated with me.
Thank you, Luz, for jumping in there. Thank you, Roni, for also responding. I think it's like a super interesting conversation. I also want to acknowledge and be respectful that it is after 9, and I've only asked for people to stay here until 9 o'clock. So I was just wondering if, like, in holding these things and these ideas, if Messiah Rhodes, can we start maybe giving you the last voice here tonight?
No, I mean, I think the wrap up is pretty fantastic. Is about thinking about the long count. It's thinking about the 6th generation. Kind of like the native ideology. It's like we have to think about that endurance when we're dealing with an opponent of white supremacy. It's about the long count, and it's important to set forth. Like, it's not only to build the tools to exist now, but to build the tools to fight 2 generations from now. Because but at the same time, you build the tools, but you hope by the 2nd generation to be over. I mean, that's being idealistic, and also being prepared to fight for the long run. And that's why I feel with my documentary, I kind of expressed that in some ways. I showed that my mom's like father was incarcerated, she was incarcerated, and then I had to fight the edge of that experience. So 3 generations, and we hope for 3 generations from now to never even remember what happened with that. That's what remember it, acknowledge it. The same thing in Australia right now, with like all these 20% of the population are former descendants of convicts. We want to be part of society too. We just want to be people too. We want to live and to see our humanity. And it's important that our children feel that humanity as well, because when your parent is gone, a part of you is lost as well. And it's like, and we need to acknowledge that, you're human, you're a person too, even if your parent is not there for you. So yeah, I feel it's really important conclusion about the youth and about the next generation. And Black Lives Matter represents that in a lot of ways. It represents this kind of like frazzled, kind of put together, amazing moment that's like still going on. But at the same time, I think all of us have been in this movement long enough to know that there's going to be something after this that's going to be even more bigger, or even more groundbreaking, or maybe even the end of it. Like, but we always be optimistic about the next thing would be the end of it. I mean, that's what keeps me not being burned out, like to keep on fighting and know every win feels like the end of it. Every win feels like a breath. So in 2020, even though we have these crazy infection rates for people of color, I want to go back to Finay Sykes of Hope House. She passed away dealing with formerly incarcerated women at Hope Transitional Housing. Many people passed away from COVID-19, and we're alive here. So we can be depressed and sad and angry and those kinds of feelings, but it's really important for us to move forward. Otherwise, what's the point? With so many people gone, so many people behind, and that's the kind of feeling I have a lot of times. And I have to live for others. I have to live for myself. I have to learn from the mistakes I made and the mistakes some other people made, to be a better person and be a better community. So, and Black Lives Matter, in a lot of ways, that's what makes it remarkable in a lot of ways. It's so big that you can include all these kind of things within the movement, these kind of conversations within it, you know. So I'm really optimistic about the future, even though Trump is going to be president for at least a couple of more months or so. So
I had a question that I wanted to ask Messiah. Back a few years, did you ever stay at the Campbell House in New York City?
And up in Albany?
No, in New York City.
I stayed at the Covenant House when I was 16. I don't know if you've heard of the Covenant House. It's like a teenager drop-off shelter.
Right. I'm familiar with Covenant House, but this is called the Campbell in New York City.
I did. Like, I worked for the Department of Homeless Services, and I filmed like a kind of like to film the different process of homeless, because like there's different parts. It's like kind of like going out there to see who's homeless, the transitional housing, and I did like a full kind of like project with Department of Homeless Services. And that was recent. That was like 4 years ago.
I saw that while you were dancing. They say you became a dancer.
Oh yeah.
And that was you.
Yeah. It was like when I was a little kid, like little tiny.
No. You were, it was, it looked like you were late teens or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Very good to see you progress to this point and have thoroughly enjoyed the presentation and wish you continued success with your endeavors.
Thank you.
I'm a long-time 40-year-old friend of, 40-year friend of Steve Pierce from the sanctuary there.
Yeah.
And that's how I got to get hooked up with the presentation tonight. And I've thoroughly enjoyed everybody's input, and I wish y'all continued success.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm going to jump in here now. Michael, thank you so much for that. And I'm going to thank everyone for spending Friday night with us. And I'm going to thank Messiah Rhodes. Thank you for being so generous with your time.
No, thank you for everyone. Yeah, I wish I was up there to help out. I know, but we'd be safe together soon.
And Roni and Nicole and Thomas, it was great hearing from you as well. And of course, I will probably bug each of you again for an interview for the Hudson Mohawk magazine in the not too distant future. And those that are still here, I just want to quickly plug, we are hiring for our coordinator for the Hudson Mohawk magazine, because our great coordinator is moving on to other great things. So if you know someone who would be fantastic fit for our community radio show, please check out mediasanctuary.org. And I hope you all have a beautiful and safe rest of your weekend and night. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Thank you, everybody. Peace, love, and hair grease. Thank you.
Bye.